Hello, adventurer. It's good to see you. You have made it to the morning grind.
Welcome, welcome.
It's the live stream at the beginning of the Geekverse, where we talk about all types of topics in geekdom, gaming, and fantasy, with an emphasis on being constructive and creating the things that we want to exist in the world.
It's all on the grind, Sizemore. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
That's exactly right. There are a lot of adventures to be had today. Dungeons to explore and monsters to slay, and who knows what a random encounter might send our way. That's why we have to prepare, so settle in now for the morning grind with your favorite beverage in hand.
Tea? Or maybe something a little stronger. I've got a few bottles of the old Wynyard left.
Whatever you want. Pull up a chair.
Dude.
If you're feeling fancy, how about a cappuccino? Or a frappuccino? Or how about an espresso?
Just tea, thank you.
Sounds good to me, Gandalf. Whatever you want. I'm just glad you're here.
Everyone is welcome. You can just watch if you want. You don't have to worship anything you don't want to worship.
Thank you, Mike. But be forewarned.
Sometimes we get really strange characters around here.
Wait, what's that you say? Why can't you come and be a part of the stream?
My wife would disown me.
Oh no, I bet she'll be fine with it. Come on in.
Am I scared for my safety? No.
What are we supposed to do?
Everybody do the secret handshake.
Secret cultist handshake.
Oh, now do wizards who love each other.
It's my friend is a science.
I still don't have gills, but it's fine.
It's all on the grind, son. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
Dude, this would be a sick place to bring the band.
Indeed it would be, Dave. It really would. I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Oh, look, here's someone new.
Is this the cultist meetup?
Yes it is.
Come to hang out? Please accept me. I have nothing else.
Okay, we accept you. Everyone's welcome here.
Brought some snacks.
Well, that makes things even better.
You want some coffee? I don't drink coffee. You sure? It's cultist coffee. What makes it cultist coffee? I'm a cultist and I'm drinking it. Oh. Then I'll have some.
What exactly is going on here?
I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome, welcome. It's so great to have you. Oh, and look, here comes another stranger.
Can we help you?
Yes, fellow cultists. I could really use some food.
Oh yeah? Welcome. We have donuts.
Oh, it's me. I'm glad I'm here. I'm sure you have a few questions for me, though.
What's your name? Who do you work for? What god do you worship?
Great questions, Rob.
I'm Steve King, and I worship Nyarlathotep.
No, not really. I'm just Heath, and I won't be worshiping anything this morning. But I will be your host. Welcome to the office. We're going to have a great time. I've got my coffee ready, because now it's time for the morning grind.
If you could become a fish, that would be amazing. Then I could command you with my mental fish powers.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the morning grind. Welcome to the office. I'm having an audio-only kind of morning today. I was trying to figure out what to do. I was planning on doing something with Gather Town, because I really want us to be able to get together with... Or at least try out that software, which we looked at. Was that yesterday? We looked at GatherTown. We were walking around inside a tavern that I had created. I really want us to potentially, or I want to try that out, to potentially use that as some way to get together and potentially have other conversations and play games. And so I was trying to get a couple of things worked out on that this morning, but I'm not quite there yet. And then I realized that I was over my time this morning and I needed to come on here to the morning grind. So I'm wasn't quite ready to get that going out to the world, but I should do that. I would like to be able to do that soon. And then I was like, oh, I got to come up with a topic for today. I didn't really want to go back to GURP space combat. I kind of felt like the GURP spaceships and things like that. I'm mildly curious to seeing how it uses. It said that it had abstract combat and used things like different tasks on board the ship. which I think is very important if you're going to keep people engaged and you're trying to do something like Star Trek style or Star Wars style capital ship combat. You need everybody to be engaged and not just the person who's playing the navigator or something like that. So I was mildly interested in that, but there was just a lot there. There was a lot there. But I was trying to also clean up yesterday and move some stacks of gaming stuff around. And I found that I did have a copy of Ships in the Sea, but I also have a copy of it digitally. And so I thought, oh, let me just pull this up. So because I was working and then lost track of time this morning, hair is not brushed, everything is not ready. So I was like, oh, well, listen, I'm just gonna have to go audio only when I was trying to get this ready. So that's why. So let's see. Oh, James says, good morning. The move has finally concluded, so I can return back to my regular Geekverse programming. Awesome. Yes, I hope everyone did have a good Independence Day. Oh, James says, I've been on a pirate kick lately, so this will be right up my alley. So does anybody remember this book? Good morning, Lynn. Oh, and Mike. Does anyone remember this book? I remember this book being a big deal when it came out. This was a major part of our AD&D games when this book was released. And so it got a lot of play. I also remember it being very deadly. I mean, this I think was one of the best books, like best, this is the Dungeon Master's Rules Supplement, one of the blue books. A lot of the, I don't know. I guess a lot of the players' books that I remember were pretty good. The brown ones, the one that's had the brown cover. This is probably the best. This is, as I recall, I was just looking back on my shelf back here. This is probably the best of the DM's guides, the DM guides that were in blue. I don't have all of them. For some reason, I have 2 copies of A Campaign Guide to Catacombs. Campaign Source Book, Catacombs Guide. I don't really actually remember how much about that one at all. And I'm not sure why I have 2 copies on the shelf. The Castle Guide, I think, was okay, but it's a bit light. I think I wanted more out of it, and it didn't really get a whole lot of use. I remember being really interested in it from the castle building kind of thing. And of course, I suppose that was the outgrowth of domain level play, because it wasn't really in AD&D. So you did have the Castle's Guide, but the Castle Guide, but it never really got used all that much. And then there is the Arms and Equipment Guide. And that was a lot of fluff. And it would be funny to look at the Arms and Equipment Guide today because of the changes and improvements in what we understand as far as armor and weapon technology and the terminology and things like that. So that was definitely fantasy arms and armor guide back in AD&D times. But as far as the one that I can remember that got the most play of the blue books was this one. Does anybody else have a similar memory? Sable Phoenix says, that's the nice thing about the internet. You can roll right out of bed and hop online in your pajamas and nobody would know unless you turn on the camera. Well, that's true too. Yes. You can definitely do that. A vast steel mongoose says. So, okay, let's check it. Let's check this out. Let's see what was in this. I also remember this being deadly because once we were looking at this, we're like, don't go anywhere near the sea until at least 5th level. Now, we played the Shahogwin games. That's probably one of the reasons why this one got quite a bit of play, is because like Evil Tide. Oh, who did those? Why can't I call his name right now? Evil Tide, D&D. I guess we played through all 3 of them. Evil Tide's the first of an adventure trilogy, continuing with Night of the Shark and concluding with Seas of Blood. Oh, by Bruce R. Cordell. That's right, Bruce R. Cordell. Does anybody remember or play Evil Tide, the Shahagwin trilogy, or that was the first one? I know we played Evil Tide at least once, maybe twice, and then Night of the Shark. I don't remember what Seas of Blood or Sea of Blood was, but we may have played it. I know we played Night of the Shark. So that's probably why this book got a lot of play, because I think they came out, I think they may have come out roughly the same time. So you had sea-based adventuring, and then this guidebook for sea-based adventuring. Oh, so no, Lynn says these books date from a period when I didn't have a gaming group and wasn't collecting books. James also likewise doesn't have the same memory. All right, so let's see what this was. To get to sea, as far back as the dawn of recorded time, humanity has experienced this primal impulse. The wave-tossed surface of the ocean promises mystery. It pulls relentless at some inner chord. Scientists tell us that life sprang from the sea. Perhaps this explains our fascination with things nautical, a kind of homecoming, a return to the source. Whatever the reason, sea travel holds an important place in our history, mythology, and literature. Historically, mankind has sailed sea for adventures, exploration, and less noble goal of conquest, including war, colonization, and exploration. Sailing then represents a kind of victory, a triumph of intellect over matter. It also offers challenges, hardships, and the possibility of death. The human imagination responds to these stimuli. Jason and his journey on the Argos, Odysseus' wave-tossed wanderings at the angry hands of Poseidon, and the work of writers such as Jack London, Lovecraft, Melville, and H.G. Wells all demonstrate the excitement, horror, terror, and adventure generated by tales of the sea and mighty heroes who sail upon it. Nautical adventures and campaigns, then, are one way that dungeon masters can excite and inspire new players. The promise of exploration and adventure on the high seas offers players new and exciting new ways to experience their characters and the fantasy setting all around them. After all, what could be more stimulating than traveling in a world where the phrase, "Here there be dragons," hastily scribbled on the edge of an old Sea Dogs map, signals a very real danger? So, the first thing... Okay, well, actually, I kind of skipped past the a table of contents here. So, nautical adventuring, kinds of ships. So, we've got a bunch of information on ships. That's where we're going first. Then nautical travel. Then nautical encounters, then nautical combat, underwater adventuring, underwater survival. This was a great section. You know, there was the wilderness survival guide, and also the It's a Dungeoneer's guide from Dungeons & Dragons. Both of those provided a lot of information on things like drowning, underwater survival. And those are the kinds of things I think about when I think about role-playing games for things like water, or rules for role-playing games for water. I think of like this book and underwater adventuring. And that's why a lot of the times in like 5th edition, when the rules are so simple, I'm like, wait a minute, that's it? That's all I'm looking for? That's all that's in here? So things like underwater survival here, breathing, vision, temperature, freezing to death, communication, movement, dungeon mastery tips. That's probably a very good chapter right there. Underwater combat right here, the advanced underwater combat, spells underwater, magic items underwater. I mean, there is a lot here. That's probably the more interesting stuff rather than just taking a look at the different types of ships. We'll go through that maybe pretty quickly. Underwater topology, denizens of the deep. So this is got a lot of, I mean, this is a packed book. This is really a packed book. Oh, no. Night of the Baby Shark. Oh, no. Good morning, Zero the Blade. We can't start that. So it says, Dungeon Mastery Tips, a note on ship design. Despite a gradual improvement in ship building techniques, shipwrights face a difficult choice, whether to build a ship for speed or for stability. Because a ship's beam, or maximum width, see glossary, affects its overall speed, vessels capable of fast movement must possess a thin, streamlined shape. A trim ship does, in fact, move at greater speeds than its heavier and wider counterparts, but is considerably more prone to capsizing as larger beams promote greater overall stability. Dungeon masters should keep this in mind when designing their own ships or converting historical ships for game use. So our first category of ships is coasters. Ships in this category do not possess sufficient cargo space or crew quarters to support extended voyages. As a result, these vessels must remain in sight of land, or in the case of auxiliary boats such as skiffs, their primary mother ship. Furthermore, these ships cannot withstand the powerful and unpredictable forces of the open ocean. Only the most accomplished sailor or the biggest fool would dare to take these ships out to sea. Some coasters do, however, function well along rivers and on lakes. Canoe, cargo ship. I think someplace in here, maybe at the back or something, or maybe as we go down, I don't know. There are like layouts for different types of ships, for these different types of ships. Fishing boat, Drummond, Great Galley. So used during the Middle Ages, this ship is an improved version of the Drummond. The Great Galley runs about 130 feet long and 20 feet wide. Most of its power stems from its 144 oars. Multiple dungeon mastery tips, multiple uses for ships. The placements of ships into generalized categories provides the dungeon master with information on the probable location of ship encounters. That is, most likely place that characters will encounter a given ship. These categories are by no means absolutely rigid. As mentioned, did we breathe and ship? I don't think we did. We'll do that after this. These categories are by no means absolutely rigid. As mentioned several times before, ships designed for coastal use can, in fact, travel out into the open sea. Likewise, coastal ships, such as the Drummond, can travel on riverways. This holds true for seafaring ships. Of course, a sailor has to account for the degree of danger inherent in using a ship in a different environment than demanded by its original design. When determining whether or not a ship can survive in a different setting, the DM should consider three things: the ship's draft, the depth of water necessary to float the ship, its seaworthiness, as capacity to support its crew with food and shelter. Dungeon masters will find a detailed discussion of these factors in Chapter 2. Drakkar, Nar, Skiff, Trimarine. Trireme, not Trimarine. So seafarers, that's our next category of ship. These ships possess sufficient cargo space and stability for long sea voyages. Nevertheless, most seafaring craft remain fairly close to the shore, as unpredictable forces of nature can damage or destroy any vessel. Seafarers work well when used in inland seas, such as the Black Sea or the Mediterranean Sea, for shorter open ocean voyages. Caravel, Cog, Longship, it's our Viking ship. Outrigger, Sohar. Lynn says, I would guess that Autoluke's Freezing Sphere is a really bad spell to cast underwater. I don't know that one, but it sounds like it. Inlanders. These trips primarily cover inland waterways. Oh, so here's our illustrations of different kinds. Skiff, outrigger, barge, longship, Drummond, Sohar. These are probably good terms. You know, to use in, well, any type of fantasy game. You know, Game of Thrones sometimes all of a sudden went to the sea, right? We had all the information about the ships and things like that. Oh, the Sohar, that's a Middle Eastern merchant ship. The 90-foot ship possesses 3 masts, a small forecastle, and a crew quarters for 20 people. In addition, a Sohar can hold up to 100 tons of cargo and supplies, more than enough to cover an extended sea voyage. The Sohar's stability, maneuverability, and movement rate make it an ideal vessel for trade or war. Adventurers will certainly encounter these ships in Arabian cultures or in areas of heavy trade. I like this art style. A nautical glossary here. Oh, and then here's our stats. Oh, and how long it takes to build one. Oh, a Manta is a Shahagwin-built warcraft. What is a Manta? Ship characteristics, move. So what do you got? What have we got here? We got move, seaworthiness, pursuit, maneuver, size, crew, passengers, and cargo. So seaworthiness represents the stability and durability of a vessel. The higher the number, the more reliable the vessel is in adverse conditions. Pursuit represents the ship's ability to use its speed to catch or avoid enemy ships. A ship's pursuit rating comes into play during the maneuvering phase. Hey, let's take our sip right here. Good morning, PH. Oh, and Helsinki's Ghost. Good morning. Good morning. And good morning, Tomocrat. Yes, we're talking about ships here. So let's do our morning sip. Let's take 2 deep breaths, complete exhales, and then take a sip of your favorite beverage this morning. I've got water. I really needed some ice water this morning. Here we go. Breathe in, breathe in. And sip. I hope you did it with me. That's our mental health part. So, a ship's pursuit rating comes into play during the maneuvering phase of a ship-to-ship combat when the distance between the ships is large enough that subtle maneuvers have little meaning. A vessel's pursuit is equal to 1d6 plus 1/3 of its current movement rating. A vessel's pursuit rating is equal to 1d6 plus 1/3 of its current movement rating. The entry in the table shows only the vessel's typical pursuit value. Oh, okay. Typical pursuit value, but I was wondering why we're having to roll for it. Oh, okay. So the pursuit value is 1d6 plus its typical pursuit value. That's its current movement rating. So we do have movement rating over here. So move notes to table 2, movement rate. Details the speed of individual ships in tens of yards per melee round. Okay, so that's what this move is. Tens of yards per melee round. For example, a canoe, movement rate of 6. Canoe, movement rate of 6. Travels at a pace of 60 yards per round. Chapter 2, Nautical Travel, fully examines the intricacies of ship movement. The numbers separated by slashes represent the speed of vessels equipped with both sail and oars. The first number represents the vessel's movement under both sails and oars. The second number indicates the vessel's movement under sails only. The third is under oars only. So here we got the Drummond here, 18 under sails and oars, 16 under sails only, and then 12 under oars only. Maneuverability represents the overall maneuverability of each ship. No, I know. I said I was going to be audio only this morning because I didn't. Missed my time. I was behind getting started this morning, and so didn't really prepare everything for video this morning. PH says, I was watching the yesterday grind and remember a video from Baron de Rop that discusses the 5-room dungeons and suggests improvements by combining it with the 3-act structure. Oh, well, I would be interested in seeing that. That sounds like because it was talking about, when we were talking about the 5-act structure or the 5-room dungeon, he was talking about story structure, which really interested me because we've been talking about story structure. Well, of course, we talk about story structure a lot on Table Talk, but then integrating some type of story into the game, and particularly coming up with some way to do some type of really nice adventure story structure would be really nice. So he did kind of talk about in the beginning with that 5-room dungeon, talking about, well, story structure, and this is kind of informed by the hero's journey and things like that. But then he didn't really explain that further. Like once we got into the actual design of the 5-room dungeon, he didn't really talk about that further. So I guess it was the general inspiration. He didn't actually talk about, like, now this room is this part of the journey. So I'll check that out. I also think that combining it with that cyclical dungeon, I think there's a lot to be said for the cyclical dungeon as well. Baron de Rop has consistently good videos, short and to the point too. The name of the video, is Why the 5-Room Dungeon Falls Short. I'm going to look that up, and I might have to watch that after the stream. Why the 5-Room Dungeon Falls Short. Okay, I found it. I'll watch that after the stream. I'm curious about that. Helsinti says, I've watched a bunch of your morning grinds and I see that you introduce new material each episode. You mentioned ongoing projects, but I'm not sure how much older topics are revisited. Yeah, there are ongoing projects, and some of them I don't get to talk about quite as much. We used to try to do like on Tuesdays, and I would love to be able to get back to this. On Tuesdays, we talked about RPG design and trying to work it through a project. And I would really love to be able to return to this kind of structure. On Tuesdays, we tried to do RPG design. And then Wednesday was world building Wednesdays. But the problem, and I was trying to use that as a way to make sure that I was pushing projects forward. But unfortunately, I haven't been as successful at that as I would like to be. Maybe I need, see, this is Wednesday, right? I'm thrown off on my days because of the holiday. Let me check that. Yes, today's Wednesday. So ordinarily, this is supposed to be World Building Wednesday. Maybe we can try that structure again. Maybe try to get back on that. I was working on the Rabavania World Primer. As far as that goes, I've been having difficulty getting Pathfinder 2 to fit. Maybe we can talk about that next time. And I have not done RPG building on Tuesdays in a while because I need more time. It doesn't make sense to actually build it online. It makes sense. I have to type something and then discuss it online. But you're right. I'm not quite as regular as I would like to be. That was the purpose. I'm working on another project. Actually, well, I'll tell you that we are actually. I've got somebody who is interested in Rabavania, and the next project I'm going to try to do 2 more crowdfunding campaigns this year. Maybe 3. I've got a Christmas one to go, and then I've got interest in running the Goodnight Sword again on Indiegogo. I was posting about that on Instagram, and so actually one of the thing that's taken up a lot of my time over the past maybe week or week and a half is to try to get a Goodnight Sword Indiegogo campaign going. I was trying to write something else to add another book to that, but I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time to make sure that book is completed because I was going back to another book that wasn't finished yet, and I was like, now hold on, I could put this book on like a Goodnight Sword Indiegogo campaign, but no time. But I was preparing marketing material basically a lot of yesterday for another round of Goodnight Sword on Indiegogo because I went through the entire process of going through a print on demand kind of crowdfunding campaign. So I've almost fulfilled the Goodnight Sword Kickstarter campaign. I was missing a few books and I ordered them and I saw that they did ship. So they should be showing up anytime so I could finish that campaign. But I've been through that entire process, worked out the kinks, figured out what to do. But I think that Goodnight Sword can, there are a lot more people out there who would like Goodnight Sword than obviously got them on that Kickstarter campaign. That was a very light and fast kind of Kickstarter campaign. So I'm thinking about doing a Goodnight Sword Indiegogo campaign, following up this Kickstarter campaign, and then going to Kickstarter with a Christmas Kickstarter. But that has to be early because I'd want to be sure that everybody got their book actually in time for Christmas. So like you have to get your book after Thanksgiving, ideally. That way you would actually have it for the Christmas season, which means it has to be run early. And I would really, really like to be able to get a Theophany book out. I was talking to Brianna about that yesterday. Brianna and I spoke briefly. Brianna's doing a much better job about getting her long-term projects done. She's gotten lots of scripts written. She's been much more successful on that than I have. But I've got Theophany material, and I was thinking about how to do that, and I was kind of working on that a little bit last night as well, saying, now, wait a minute, if I were trying to take some of this material that I've got sitting over here for Theophany and get a book out for it, what would I do? That was a bit of a diatribe, but yes, that's what's been going on. If you're talking about coming back to this book might be worth revisiting for me. I have a campaign setting planned where deep sea or anything like shallow water invites really enthusiastic sea monsters and kaiju. Yeah, originally when we were doing the morning grind, we would take a look at we were looking at RPGs and we were just looking at their action resolution mechanics. And so we would do a whole lot of RPGs and just take a look at how to play what is their action resolution mechanic. And then the intention was that, well, when we're taking a look at, say, inventory or encumbrance, we would come back to different RPGs and take a look at their encumbrance. Later, we tended to stay on one book for longer and go through an entire book. So there are things from earlier on in the morning grinds that I would like to come back to when we were talking about that particular part of RPG design. So that's possible. PH says there's another video that expands the 5-room dungeon and talks about 10-room dungeon. It is from JP Couvert and is named Creeway. I'm going to look up that one too. Okay, found it. I'll check that one out. I'll check that one out as well. Tom McCrat says, I got Goodnight Sword for my nephew's birthday. Ironically, that's in the middle of December. But that's all right. That's all right. If people are coming by and they need a Goodnight Sword, hey, you might need a good gift for Christmas or birthdays or things like that that are coming out later. I try to turn it around so that people can do that. Okay, so maneuverability. Let's go over here. Maneuverability represents the overall maneuverability of each ship. So maneuverability is also a dice roll. The statistic comes into play during the maneuvering phase of nautical combat when the opposing ships are fairly close together. Vessels possessing both sail and oars have 2 maneuverability ratings. The first, lower number, represents the craft's maneuverability when moving under sail, even if oars are also employed. The second number represents the vessel's maneuverability when using only oars. And so our maneuverability with only oars is higher if you have that, and not by a whole lot. Generally by a +1, it's looking like. So, like, for instance, the Drakkar is 1d6 plus 3 plus 1, or versus 1d6 plus 4. Size, overall length, and tonnage. Crew represents the number of sailors or rowers on board a particular vessel. Vessel? I don't know where that came from. And then there's a whole lot of, so this is crew. Okay, so this is crew. We've got multiple numbers for the crew as well. So the first number in the column represents the maximum number of crew members the ship can support, as well as the total number of crew members that can work on a vessel without getting each other's way. Thus, up to 60 crewmen can work on a pentaconter at one time. Notice that crews with room for Marines can substitute additional crewmen for those. These crewmen cannot help operate the ship. However, they can relieve tired or wounded members of the active crew. They're providing a core of fresh sailors during the long voyage or deadly combat. The second number of this column represents the average number of crewmen needed to operate the vessel. The third number indicates the absolute minimum. If a ship has less than this number of crew on board, it's effectively crippled. So, for instance, Drummond is maximum 200, but generally 85, and then 31. Trireme, large crew complement. Oh, this Manta. I was like, what is this with 400, 200, 100? That's that specifically Shahagwan thing. Oh, here they are. I thought they were like these floor plans of different ships. So if you need to fight on board one, we've got that. Con Caravel. Nautical travel. How complicated is this going to be? All right, rowing. As mentioned earlier, rowing a ship with a magnitude of oarlocks, such as a bireme or trireme, requires a great deal of skill and coordination for all involved, especially the oars master. Contrary to popular belief, slaves were not put to work rowing large warships, as they did not possess the necessary skills or zeal. In fact, rowers were highly trained specialists. Daily movement. In an AD&D game, a full day of travel is about 10 hours. Dungeon masters can easily determine the total distance an oar-powered ship travels in a single day by multiplying the ship's movement rate by 2. Thus, a pentaconter, whose movement rate is 18, can travel a total rate of 36 miles in a single day. Occasionally, oar-powered vessels might require additional speed. In such case, it falls to the oars master or ship's captain to coax, cajole, or otherwise inspire his crew to greater speed. The ship's captain or oar masters must roll a 12 or better on a roll of a d20 to get the extra speed. A successful seamanship proficiency check grants an extra +3 to the bonus roll. If the roll is successful, the vessel's movement rate increases by 1/3 for 5 rounds. Failure indicates the officer cannot inspire the rowers to keep such a fast pace. A ship's officer can attempt to increase speed only once every 5 rounds. You got to get that speed out of people's muscles. For example, the Lambrick, the captain of the Royal Pecanter, this is another word that I don't really say online very often, Pentaconter. Clandestine spawns another Pentaconter flying a pirate flag. Alarmed, he attempts to spur his rowers to greater speed. The GM checks Lambrick's seamanship proficiency, it's 14, and rolls a 12, granting him a +3 bonus on his d20 to inspire his rowers. The captain rolls only a 10, so that's a roll of a 12 here. That had to do with the proficiency check. Rolling seamanship proficiency. Got it. +3. The captain rolls only a 10, which rises to 13 thanks to the bonus. Lambrick succeeds, and the clandestine travels at a movement rate of 24, which is 18 divided by 3 is equal to 6, plus 18 is equal to 24 for the next 5 rounds. Rowers can keep such a back-breaking pace for a maximum of 3 turns. After this period, the exhausted rowers must rest for a number of rounds equal to twice the time they spent doubling their pace. Ships with resting rowers can only move at 1/3 of their normal rate. Once clear of the pirates, Lambrick allows his rowers a bit of rest. The tired oarsmen must rest for 1 turn, twice the amount of time they spent doubling their pace. During this time, the clandestine's maximum movement rate is 6. Lambrick hopes the pirates have given up the chase. So in addition to increasing the ship's speed, an oars master or captain can inspire his rowers to work harder or longer, thereby increasing the maximum distance covered by a single day. Once again, the captain or oars master must roll 12 or better on a 1d20 and successful seamanship check with a -2 penalty. Grants the +3 bonus to the roll. So a oarsman must roll a 12 or better on a d20, but if you first do your seamanship proficiency check. So it's kind of strange that it's not just based on your proficiency check. I think today we might just do this based on, well, okay, you're going to have to take a seamanship proficiency check with some type of modification or something like that. So it seems like, and it's been a while since I've actually played AD&D, but the proficiencies actually have a number. So the proficiencies are not a bonus. So for down here, the Lambrick's seamanship proficiency is 14. So I think that means you have to roll a 14 or lower to pass that proficiency check. So it's like a skill check, but it's a skill check to decide whether or not you're going to get a +3 bonus on this roll where you just have to go 12 or better. Arguably, that's the kind of thing, it's not a good idea to do that twice. Like, why have 2 rolls? That seems like the kind of thing that gets smoothed over in today's games. That like, well, all right, if we got to figure out whether we can travel longer, why are we doing this in 2 rolls when we could do it in just 1? It seems like that to me. I guess part of that, I don't know. How do you feel about that? I guess this is something you're trying to inspire people, but still, maybe that's part of your seamanship check. I don't know. It just seems like something we would do in 1 roll today. But so if you succeed your seamanship proficiency check with a -2 penalty, you get a +3 bonus to that roll. So you got a -2 penalty to your seamanship check. If you pass that, you get a +3 bonus on this roll where you've got to roll 12 or better. This is also not a unified action resolution mechanic, because it seems like the proficiency check is rolling under, and then over here you've got to roll higher than. You got to roll better than. Once pushed to this limit, however, a ship's complement of rowers must rest for at least 12 hours before they can row again. If the check fails, none of the ship's officers can attempt to increase daily movement again until the next day. For example, Lambrick wishes to reach the port of Brython by nightfall, a distance of 45 miles. Since his pentaconter's maximum daily movement is only 36 miles, he realizes that he must push his crew. Once again, Lambrick succeeds with his dice rolls. Because of his curses, threats, cajoling, and other inspirational techniques, the pentaconter can travel a total distance of 48 miles. That's 36 divided by 3 is equal to 12, plus 36 equals 48. Thus, the clandestine successfully docks in Brython, and Lambrick receives a bonus for his timeliness. Rowing through the night. Ocean-going vessels powered by oars, such as longships, will occasionally find it necessary to move by rowing far from land, where beaching the ship for the night proves impossible. In these cases, the ship's daily movement rate in miles remains twice its speed, as the rowers must pace themselves, working less hard than usual to keep the ship constantly moving. Moving under oars and sails. Any ship moving under sails, even when its rowers help, count as a sailing ship. Wind strength modifies its base movement. Such a ship's daily movement rate in miles equals 3 times its adjusted movement rate. So rowing, okay, what if it's just the PCs rowing? I do miss this kind of stuff for something like 5th edition. All right, Lynn says the haranguing will continue until morale improves. That sounds like what Lambrick's strategy was up here. So in the course of nautical adventuring, PCs may find themselves required to row a small vessel, such as a fishing boat or skiff. Characters can roll for a number of hours equal to 1/2 of their constitution scores rounded up. Thus, an adventurer with a constitution of 15 could row a ship for 8 hours. Characters wishing to exert themselves beyond the normal endurance must make a constitution check. Success indicates the PCs in question can row for an additional hour. However, characters lose 1 constitution point for every extra hour of rowing, thereby making it difficult to continue with the exertion. Unconsciousness results if a character's constitution drops to 0. Lost constitution points returned at a rate of 1 per full hour of rest. Okay, so that would make it very... Let's talk about that for a moment. That would make it very difficult to row yourself into unconsciousness, because you would know that you're going to go unconscious when your score drops to 0. And don't we know, however, characters lose 1 constitution point for every hour of rowing, thereby making it more difficult to continue with the exertion. I've become more of a fan. Let's see. Yeah. So So you would know when to stop. See, here's a point where I think that the randomness is good, because I'm typically against randomness, or against a lot of randomness. We've been talking a lot about reducing randomness over the shows. But here we've got a situation where, don't we want the character to potentially be able to row themselves into unconsciousness? That seems like something that they should be able to do if they're pushing themselves. So I think in these situations, systems where we're counting up are better than counting down. I've been particularly enjoying. There are some disadvantages to that with like a count up system. Sometimes particular roles can all of a sudden have a huge effect. Can all of a sudden put you out of action. But I've been thinking a lot about count up, and maybe we need to talk about that specifically when we go back to RPG design. Maybe Tuesday. I've got too much. The problem is I got too much going on. But if you let's see, how would you do this? If you're counting up, then you might say, okay, you're going to roll 2d6. Then this is just off the top of my head, but this kind of system would be like 2d6, and if you roll higher than your constitution, then you fall unconscious. And you can roll for, go ahead and say this right up here. You can row for a number of hours equal to 1/2 your constitution score, rounded up without having to take any checks. Okay, thus this character with a constitution of 15 could roll for 8 hours. If you wish to push yourself beyond that, then your check is going to be something like 2d6 plus 1. And if you exceed your constitution, you fall unconscious. So that means that a character with a constitution of 15 doesn't, this may not be perfect, but just as an example, with a constitution of 15 would be able to roll for an additional hour and still be okay. Well, in this case, what we would want is you would want to start risking that person after 8 hours. So in the 9th hour, you would need to make some kind of test at +1 for having rode for an hour, or -1, whichever way it's going. But we'll say +1 because if you're trying to roll, you've got to roll equal to or under your constitution. And then after you try to push yourself again, it's going to be +2. And then if you try to push yourself again, it's +3, and then +4. There needs to be a risk of failure just by the first hour of pushing yourself. That's the downside to this, because you can collapse after 1 additional hour. But on the other hand, the player, because it seems like something where the player should be able to push their luck, and you don't know exactly when you're going to fall out. You see what I'm trying to say here? Did I say that very well at all? Lynn says a unified mechanic is good, but sometimes there will be situations where it just makes more sense to do it another way. All I can think of is rowers and Eric the Viking and the rowmaster yelling at the rowers and no one can understand him. I haven't seen that. But anyway, maybe if I said maybe explanation here of a count up system worked, maybe it didn't. But here, for example, Shendakar the fighter, whose constitution is 16, can row for 8 hours. If he wishes to row for an additional hour, his 9th consecutive hour of rowing, Shendakar must make a constitution check. He rolls a 13 and succeeds. Thus, the hardy fighter can continue rowing for another hour. However, Shendakar's constitution drops to 15 after the additional hour, as the strain of continued rowing affects his body. If he wants to row for yet another hour, the fighter would have to roll a 15 or lower on a d20. Because this one's got a constitution of 16. So he could have failed. So in this way, he could have failed after the first one. It's going to become more and more difficult. But the chances are that he is going to lapse into unconsciousness is very low, because unconsciousness only occurs if he drops to 0. And why would you continue to push yourself when you're getting to 0? I mean, that's the last point, right? If you've got one point left, you'd probably stop and let somebody else take over. Lost constitution points return at a rate of 1 hour per full hour of rest. Okay, additionally, a character can increase his boat's road movement rate by making a strength check. Success indicates the character in question has increased his boat's movement by 1/3. Thus, a character traveling in a canoe, movement rate of 6, can make a successful strength check and move at a rate of 8. 6 divided by 3 equals 2 plus 6 equals 8. The character must make a strength check every 5 rounds to see if he can sustain the increased pace. Once the character fails a check, he cannot attempt to increase speed again until he's rested. The absolute minimum amount of time for sustaining such a pace is 3 turns. Or maximum, the maximum amount of time. Once an adventurer has stopped increasing his movement rate, he must rest for a number of rounds equal to twice the amount of time spent exerting himself. All right, and then rules for sailing. See, I remember. Okay, I think I remember this table here. Sailing, movement, rates, and wind. So wind, light, moderate, strong, gale, or storm. If you're sailing into the wind, minus 1/3. Movement rate modification. Into 1/3 with plus 1/3. With light wind. Across, no modification. With moderate wind, if you're sailing into it, negative 2/3 movement rate. With the wind, plus 2/3 movement rate. Across the wind, 1/3 plus 1/3 movement rate. With strong wind, NM, I guess that means you just cannot do it. With doubles your speed, and then across at 2/3. The NM stands for no movement. Ships have an effective movement rate of 0 if they attempt to sail into a strong wind. A dash indicates the ship moves at its base rate. For example, a cog, movement rate of 9, sailing across a strong wind will have 2/3 of its base movement rate added to its overall movement rate for a combined rate of 15. 9 divided by 3 equals 3. 3 times 2 equals 6. 6 plus 9 equals 15. A sailing ship's captain or helmsman can increase a ship's base speed through superior seamanship, just as officers aboard oared ships can. The bonus movement is 1/3 of the ship's base movement rate, which the DM adds to the ship's speed after any adjustments for wind and speed and duration. The speed increase lasts 10 minutes. If the attempt fails, the officers cannot try again for 10 more minutes. If the captain of the cog in the previous example also successfully inspires its crew to greater speed, the cog's adjusted movement rate would be 18. Sailing at high speed does not exhaust sailors as it does rowers, but the officer must repeat the seamanship check every 10 minutes to see if the ship and crew can maintain the faster pace. Even a subtle change in wind or sea condition can rob the ship of its extra speed. Helsinki says, second edition reveled in granular rules. It did, yes. Okay, wind strength. So we do have a table for that. To determine the strength of the prevailing wind, the Dungeon Master rolls 2d6 and consults on this wind strength for the first day of voyage. This table enables the DM to assign the wind strength category. After the first day's check, the DM should consult the next day column to find the appropriate dice for the check. He should then use this die roll for every day for 1d4 days. After that, the DM begins the whole wind check process over again. Wait, what is this? So the 2D roll over here, the first day, what is the 2D? For example, a DM makes a wind strength check on the first day of this venturing group's sea voyage and rolls a 10. Okay, so that means strong, right? The wind party sails on a strong wind for the first day. According to the table, the next day's check calls for a 1d6 plus 6 roll. Oh. So wait a minute. First, you roll a 2d6. This is what this is. I was like, what am I supposed to be adding with 2d6? But on the first day, you roll a 2d6. So in this case, he rolled a strong. So the wind strength will be strong that day. The GM then determines how long this die range is in effect by rolling a d4. A roll of 2 indicates that he uses the 1d6 plus 6 die range for 2 days before starting the whole process over again. So the next day, 1d6 plus 6 for the next d4 days. This is granular. Len says, do they get into the intricacies of tacking? That seems like something that we should have here. That seems like something that would happen. One approach could be for the wind to always blow in the direction of the plot. Yes. On the other hand, if we're doing something like the West Marches campaign and the GM is supposed to be seen as some kind of neutral arbiter right here, that what goes on with your seagoing voyage, your winds and things like that, that could be rolled for. And I was thinking about that. I was thinking about how to apply like a West Marches campaign style to the worlds that we're ostensibly working on here. And one of them did have something to do with a sea voyage. And I hadn't seen people, when I was reading a whole bunch of material on West Marches campaigns, I hadn't seen people talk about, of ships in the sea. So maybe this is a good time to be doing the of ships in the sea right here. But I had thought about a West Marches style game that starts after a massive, massive flood, thinking on the scale of something like Noah's flood. So the seas are going to, the flood is going to recede over amount of time. But we'll take the home base, the safe space, as you've got some points that are above ground or above the flood level. So they're dry land. And one of these is your safe space, like your town or something like that in the West Marches game. But in the beginning, you might have to get on a boat and then go out to some of these other small little islands where there could be an adventure, but that over time, as you're tracking time, the flood is going to recede. But you would start off, hey, we're on our tiny little island here. Let's see what else is going on, if anybody else has survived this. And then you get on your boat, and then you find some other little island and see what's on there, and then come back. So in that case, you would want the GM as neutral arbiter. You'd want to be able to, since there's no dedicated plot, you would want you'd probably want something like this. Or come up with some easier way. Okay, calms right here, yeah. Sailing ships have a movement rate of 0 in a calm. Some of these ships, such as the Nar and Pentaconter, possess oars, which allow them to move at a reduced rate when there is no wind. These ships are subject to the rowing rules described above when using their oars as the primary means of locomotion. Gales, these fierce winds blow for 1d4 days. It says star with an asterisk here. In the case of gales and storms, do not check the wind strength the next day, but after the tempest blows itself out in 1d4 days. So the fierce wind blows for 1d4 days. They force ships to make seaworthiness checks every day. See the shipwreck section of this chapter. Ships trying to move across a gale or storm are blown off course. To determine the ship's actual movement each day, move it along its intended course at its adjusted daily movement rate, and then move the ship an equal distance in the direction of the gale. A successful seamanship proficiency check by the ship's captain or helmsman reduces the distance a gale-tossed ship travels off course by 1/3. A ship turned into a gale or storm actually moves backwards at 1/3 of its base movement rate. Note that if the captain or helmsman makes a successful seamanship check, the ship's daily gale movement becomes 0 if the ship turns into the wind. For example, a gale blowing from the east would push a cog sailing north 45 miles. Base movement rate of 9 plus 2/3 for moving across the strong wind equals 15, which the DM triples to find the daily movement rate. The gale-tossed cog would only travel 30 miles off course if its captain makes a successful seamanship proficiency check. Storms. These fearsome winds force ships to make seaworthiness checks each day at a -3 penalty. See the sea wreck section of the chapter for more details. Like gales, storms alter a ship's course. Because of their unbridled ferocity, however, storms do not allow any seamanship checks to reduce total movement. Wind direction. This is for simplicity's sake. So this is for the sake of simplicity. The AD&D game assumes that the wind will always blow from one of the 4 cardinal points of the compass. The wind maintains its direction for 1d4 days before the GM must check again using the Table 5 wind direction. This is, of course, a simplification designed to make running seafaring adventures easier. Thank goodness for that. In actuality, sea wind blows from any direction and may change direction often. DMs should note that wind direction is always the direction from which the wind is blowing. Thus, an easterly wind comes from the east and blows toward the west. Spring, summer, fall, winter. Here's your 2d6. What direction? Vision. Visibility ranges. Spotted is the maximum distance a moving or stationary figure can be seen. Spotted. Type. So movement indicates the maximum distance at which a moving figure or object can be seen. The observer notes that something is moving and whether or not it rests on the surface or moves through the air. Ships under sail or oar power are considered moving objects. Type gives the maximum distance at which the general detail of a figure can be seen. Species, race, weapons, vessel type, etc. ID range is the exact identification. This is granular. Including the vessel's crew complement, detail range means small actions can be seen clearly. Here is shipwrecks. Okay, Let me get some more water. Just one second. Lynn says simplistic, but it beats solving vector math on the surface of a sphere. Yes, it does. Okay. Despite every precaution, death at sea is a real possibility, especially when you're playing advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Even the most carefully constructed vessels cannot always withstand the awesome fury of the sea and the capricious might of prevailing weather. Every ship in AD&D game possesses a seaworthiness rating between 1 and 20. This rating demonstrates the relative stability of a vessel in the face of dangerous weather or ocean conditions. The higher the seaworthiness rating, the more stable and robust the vessel. DMs can find seaworthiness ratings for all ships on Table 2. To make a seaworthiness check, the DM simply rolls a 20-sided die and compares the result to the ship's rating. If the roll is greater than the seaworthiness value, the ship either founders or grounds, depending on its location. So we are trying to roll equal to or less than our seaworthiness rating. So high seaworthy ratingness are good. Foundering. Any vessel caught within the dangerous force of a storm or gale can founder. Make one seaworthiness check each day the storm or gale lasts. A storm imposes a -3 penalty to seaworthiness check. A ship that fails its seaworthiness check sinks after 1d10 hours. Well, that's bad. Okay, so if you fail your seaworthiness check when you are in a storm or a gale, then that ship is going to sink within 1d10 hours. If the vessel possesses any smaller craft, such as a skiff, the crew has a chance of escaping. That's one of those, well, a high randomness. Oh, ship sinking. However, the boats must also make a seaworthiness check once subjected to the storm or gale. A roll of 20 on a storm-induced seaworthy check indicates the vessel in question has capsized, which is a 5% chance. The ship sinks immediately, and escape by boat is impossible. All crew and passengers must make a successful saving throw versus death magic or be trapped in the wreck and killed. I told you that travel at sea is brutal. You've got to be careful when traveling at sea in AD&D. Right, yes. Wow. Sable Phoenix says, wow, if real ships had chances to founder in multiples of 5%, we would never get across the ocean. Any heavier weather has a 15% chance to sink even a rating 20 vessel. Don't think of it as a high chance of sinking. Don't think of it as a high chance of sinking. Think of it as a high chance of failure to float. So wait, what are our numbers here? Wait, see, this is the kind of thing that sounds good until it actually starts happening. Like, when you're writing it and you're like, okay, well, if you roll a 20 on your check, you flounder and you sink. Everybody roll save versus death. Let's see. So let's look at a Drummond right here. Its seaworthiness is only 8. Its seaworthiness is only an 8. A fishing boat has a seaworthiness of 14. We've got to roll equal to or less. Great galley 9, keel boat 8, Nar 16, longship 16. The Manta, the Shahagwan boat is 18. The Sohar is 15. But for the most part, we're kind of okay. A Caravel is 18. Caravels are very seaworthy. So if you want to take one of those, so take a Caravel. But still, that means that, okay, there's a 90% chance that you're going to pass your seaworthiness check. That sounds pretty good. I will take that. But if you don't pass, there's a 5% chance that you are going. Now, this is in a gale. Now, of course, a -3. If you got to take the -3 penalty for being in a storm, Great Galley would become 6. Keelboat would become 5. Drummond would become 5. Cog is pretty good. But yeah, when you're dropping, when you're in a storm and now you're dropped by 3, you really want to be in one of these better craft. But each one of these has a 5% chance of foundering in a storm. And as we said over here, what's our first voyage day like? Well, and that's a pretty good chance of having a storm. Like you're going to encounter storms. Percent chance. But looking at our probability tables for 2 dice, because this is what we're rolling over here, that means that you're going to be rolling. Just give me the table, please. Output 2d6 on any dice. Calculate. So there is, when you're rolling 2d6 over here, well, first of all, so that means that there's a 2.78% chance of rolling a 2 and a 5.56% chance of rolling a 3. So that would be 7, 8. There's an 8% chance you're going to be becalmed. That's not good. There's also an 8% chance, roughly, I'm rounding, but an 8% chance, a little bit better than an 8% chance, that you're going to be caught in a gale or in a storm. But a storm, I mean, that's a 2d6 roll of a 12, 2.78% chance, and then you're going to be rolling your seaworthy checks at a -3 penalty. And it seems like those checks are easy to fail, generally speaking, unless you're in the very seaworthy craft. And if you fail, it doesn't say, oh, make another one. It just says, later, it says that, hey, if you fail it, that ship is going to sink in 1d4 hours. And you would better have a smaller, you can get off if you've got smaller craft, but they're going to have to be taking seaworthy checks. And what do you want to bet? What's the seaworthiness of a skiff? Six. So not great. Or if you got some canoes you're going to throw overboard, you're also trying to roll a 6. That's not great. Whereas if you roll a 20, you are instantly capsized. And you're starting to make save versus death magic spells. If the saving throw succeeds, the survivor must still attempt to swim. See the swimming rules found in the movement chapter of the player's handbooks. I mean, this just gets worse and worse and worse for you. That's the part of this that's very random. Lynn says, I wonder if where the capital ships of Zhang, his fleet would fit into the system. Those things were massive. I don't know. Not very high ACs. Now it gets to understand how an iceberg hit the Titanic. Phoenix, I think we can assume the boat is fine to get to its destination unless there is someone in the bilge actively drilling holes in the hull with an attempt to sink the ship. Death saves. Ugh. I mean, some storms tipping a boat, fine, but just a standard chance at sinking seems a bit much. Rolling a 3 or 12, 3 or 2 or 3 or 11 or 12 both have the probability of 1 in 12 on a 2d6. Yeah, Sable Phoenix says this is the kind of thing where the D20 system really breaks down. If seafaring was really this dangerous, nobody would do it. Yeah, nobody would do it, and it just seems like, and even if you're saying, okay, but hey, but this is AD&D, this is the adventure game here. We are trying to be, we're trying to be more dangerous. Because don't you want to have an adventure? And what happens at sea? Your boat sinks. Just having it sink on the roll of a 20 seems lame. Mike says smaller boats have a chance to stay afloat if capsized and can be righted once the water's calm. True. So if your canoe capsizes, you might be able to get your canoe back up. Grounding occurs when a ship enters coastal waters in fog, storm, or gale. A failed seaworthiness check indicates the vessel has run aground. Should a ship ground on a marshy coast, sandy shoal, or otherwise soft coastal area, the crew can repair and refloat it after 1 to 6 days of work, though repairs are not possible until the storm or gale blows out. The jury-rigged ship, however, makes all future seaworthiness checks at a further -3 penalty. Ugh! Until properly repaired at a shipyard. Ships that ground on rocky coastlines or coastal reefs sink in 1 to 3 hours. A natural roll of 20 on a seaworthy check indicates the ship in question splinters and sinks immediately on the jagged rocks of the coastline. Survivors must attempt to swim to shore using their swimming rules found in the movement section of the player's handbook. How bad is swimming? Hey, let me go and grab this. I got the AD&D player's handbook right here. It says in the movement section. Well, this is the revised one. Let me just look up swimming. Let's see. Swimming over here. Well, it's not in the... Oh, this is because this is a spell index, not the main index. Like, how can you not have swimming in the index? Swimming, 86, page 86. Prepare for this to be bad as well. A character with swimming proficiency knows how to swim. This is just the proficiency section. Knows how to swim and can move according to the rules given in the swimming section. So first of all, you better be proficient in swimming. Without this proficiency, they cannot swim. They can hold their breath and float, but they cannot move themselves about in water. So make sure when you're doing it, if you're doing a sailing campaign or you're going to the ocean in AD&D, make sure you have the swimming proficiency. Otherwise, you cannot swim. $158. Let's see what happens there. Swimming. Well, there's actually a lot here. Okay, I'm not going to try to go through all this here. See, there's a lot more information on swimming and holding your breath rather than 5th edition D&D, which just says something like basic, something really basic in one sentence. Cork armed vest for sailors. Lynn says it's beginning to sound like walking into a dragon's lair and kicking it to wake it up is safer than sailing under these rules. Yes. Wow, that's kind of harsh. You're just shark bait bobbing in the water. Lynn says it makes me wonder how deeply the designers thought about and tested these rules. Did they just say, hey, these numbers look good on paper, print it? But let's say, okay, so characters are either trained in swimming or are untrained swimmers or proficient swimmers. This is what it says as far as D&D goes, the AD&D book here. When the DM determines the swimming capability of the characters, the decision should be based on his campaign. If the campaign is centered around a large body of water, or if the character grew up near the sea, chances are good the character knows how to swim. Okay, at least that's saying that. However, being a sailor does not guarantee a character can swim. Many medieval mariner or black-hearted pirate never learned how to swim, and so developed a morbid fear of the water. This is the one thing that made walking the plank such a fearful punishment. Furthermore, some character races are normally suspicious of water and swimming. For whatever These may vary from campaign to campaign. Dwarves and halflings don't often know how to swim. Untrained swimmers are a fairly hapless lot. When they are unencumbered, they can manage to roughly dog paddle in relatively calm waters. If the waters are rough, the current strong, or the depth excessive, at sea or out in a lake, untrained swimmers may panic and sink. If weighed down by enough gear or reduce their movement rate, they sink like stones. If weighed down with enough gear to reduce their movement rate, they sink like stones, unable to keep their head above water. In no way do they make any noticeable progress, unless, of course, the object is to sink beneath the surface. So you might be able to dog paddle in calm water, it says, if you are completely unencumbered. Otherwise, you're going down. Proficient swimmers are able to swim, dive, and surface with various degrees of success. Proficient characters are able to swim half of their current land movement rate times 10 in yards, provided they are not wearing metal armor. A character with a movement rate of 12 could swim 60 yards, 180 feet in a round. Characters whose movement rates have been reduced to 1/3 or less of normal, or who are wearing metal armor, cannot swim. The weight of their gear pulls the character under. They can still walk on the bottom, however, at 1/3 of their current movement rate. Proficient swimmers can double their movement speed, but there's you can't do this forever. If swimming at half movement speed or treading water, the characters can maintain this for a number of hours equal to their constitution score. Each hour spent swimming causes a cumulative penalty for -1 to all attack rolls. This assumes calm water. If seas are choppy, a constitution check should be made every hour spent swimming, regardless of the character's constitution. Rough seas require more frequent checks. Heavy seas or storms may require a check every round. The DM may decide that adverse conditions cause the character's constitution scores to drop more rapidly than 1 point per hour. A character drowns if your constitution reaches 0. So, for instance, a freak wave sweeps Fira, an elf, overboard during the night. Fortunately, she can swim and she knows that land is nearby. Bravely, she sets out through calm water. Her constitution score is 16. After 14 hours of steady swimming, that's a lot of swimming, she makes it to an island. She makes an island out on the horizon. 2 hours later, she's closer, but still has some ways to go. During the next hour, her 17th in the water, her constitution drops to 15. Her attack penalty is -17. Oh, because each hour spent swimming causes a cumulative penalty to -1 to attack rolls. So after her 17th hour in the water, she's at -17 to attack rolls. She must make a constitution check. A 12 is rolled. She passes. In the last hour, the 18th, the seas become rough. Her constitution is now 13. The DM ruled that heavy seas made her lose 2 points of constitution this hour. The DM decides she must pass an extra constitution check to reach shore. She rolls a 5 and flops onto shore exhausted. So, and then there's more stuff about holding your breath and things like that as well under here. And how to recover your lost ability scores once you get to shore. Don't get swept overboard, especially if you don't know how to swim. Sable Phoenix says, I don't have swimming proficiency in real life, and I can dog paddle or front crawl and tread water. I can't do it for long, but come on. So it does seem like that the second part of that was a bit more forgiving. Survival float. Yeah, under the proficiency section, it said if you didn't have it, you're not going anywhere. But then under swimming, it was a bit more. So there was a bit of inconsistency in the player's handbook. Dungeon mastery tips: handling shipwrecks. Nautical travel often proves hazardous, as we are completely seeing here. Monstrous sea creatures and other dangers, such as pirates, violent storms, and jagged reefs, can destroy even the strongest of vessels. During a nautical campaign or adventure, it's quite possible that the PC ship will suffer such a fate. It does seem like that's quite possible that the PC ship is going to suffer such a fate. based on these numbers that we're looking at. It falls to the dungeon master to make sure these occurrences do not derail the campaign. Treated the right way, shipwrecks are a doorway into a new and unexplored territory, not an ignominious end for the PCs, as the following notes show. Shipwrecks as plot devices. This is the simplest method for dealing with shipwrecks. The dungeon master simply avoids destroying the PC's ship unless it furthers the plot. This could mean fudging some dice rolls during play or even ignoring the dice altogether. When the time comes for the PC's vessel to sink, however, the DM should accomplish this in an exciting way, making it the focal point of an entire night's gameplay. Again, the DM may need to fudge dice rolls, this time in the villain's favor, to move the story along. This technique requires subtlety, as players rarely enjoy being forced into a particular course of action or situation. That's kind of saying, yes, man, these rules for your shipwrecks are brutal, but hey, you could fudge it. Yeah, we know. And Lynn says, oh, yeah, and we haven't even gotten to the probability of being pulled to the bottom by a kraken yet. Yeah, I know. We haven't even gotten to what you're going to encounter out there. And things out there in the sea, they are rough. Lynn says, dear sweet Cthulhu, I would not like to see how these authors would simulate modern air travel. Shipwreck as transition. Some DMs allow chance a freer hand in their campaigns. In these cases, a few unlucky dice rolls may doom the PCs and their vessel. In this case, the dungeon master needs to think quickly. Don't let random occurrences spoil the adventure. The destruction of the PC's vessel is an opportunity for the DM to switch the focus of the campaign. Yeah, I know. Oh, 20. Oh, ship sank. Time to switch the focus of the campaign. If the PC's ship founders near land, the characters can wash up on the shore of a desolate island or isolated coast. Pretty classic adventure stuff right here. Such an area offers the possibility for exploration and adventure. Perhaps the area has a vast system of undersea caves housing long-lost treasure. Traversing such a cavern complex can spark several evenings of gameplay and add spice to the campaign. On the other hand, a community of humans or humanoids could call the area home, or perhaps two tribes or nations are at war. The DM could then design several adventures at which the PCs have a chance to influence the conflict. If the PCs sink in the open sea, they can begin a series of underwater adventures, assuming they can survive underwater. See the second half of this book for more information on running undersea campaigns. The group of sea elves could rescue the PCs before they drown, bringing them down to their undersea realm and enlisting their aid against the Shahagwan or some other suitable undersea antagonist. Sure, surviving the shipwreck. The key to using shipwrecks to begin new adventures is to give the player characters reasonable chances to survive. If the wreck occurs near some kind of land, the party can simply swim and trust to luck. Otherwise, the DM can devise any number of ways to keep the party afloat, at least in the short time. For example, even in real life, ships don't sink without leaving some floating wreckage behind. Of course, the PCs might have to swim a bit to reach objects large enough to support them. Various sea creatures, from dolphins to mermen to sea elves mentioned earlier, might arrive at the scene to help out, and there's always the possibility that another ship might happen along. To ensure that players retain their fear of shipwrecks, it's a good idea to make sure the party doesn't emerge unscathed. Perhaps a hungry shark or three stops by for a snack. Don't forget the destructive effects of seawater on the party's equipment, especially anything made from paper. Uh-oh, your spell book. The section on spell component saving throws. The section on spell component saving throws, on Chapter 7 could prove useful here. There's also the chance that a character swimming for his life might drop something. Anything not actually strapped to the character could be lost. Pouches and packs might open, spilling their contents. To simulate this kind of event, allow the character to designate one item per 3 character levels as something he definitely holds on to. For instance, a 10th level character could automatically hold on to 3 items of his choice, then roll d20 for each of the remaining magic items or piece of important equipment. On a roll of 12 or better, the character keeps them. Otherwise, it sinks out of sight. Recovering lost items in this manner could be an adventure in itself. Yikes. That gets us to nautical encounters. This is where you have to roll to see if you get to see the Kraken or a mermaid. I guess that's not. Well, she didn't have tails here. Sable Phoenix says, on a roll of a 20, your plane's engine all flame out and you instantly fall 500 feet per round. That's assuming that you didn't crash or burn on takeoff, right? You got to roll to make sure that the plane didn't run into something. Rogue Thinker says, survival on a chunk of debris can be adventure in and of itself. Yeah, how much time have you got to play? This is assuming that you've got a lot of time to play too. Because when like they were saying that, hey, if the ship sinks and then you're, what was it, on some island, well, that could serve for several evenings worth of adventure. Well, I guess it could. If you've got that, but that would be a huge chunk of a lot of people's playtime. All right, well, I've got to get out of here. It's been fun. I've enjoyed this conversation. We'll probably return to this book. This seems like an interesting book. I remember I have a lot of fondness from it from the AD&D days. We'll take a look at nautical combat, and I especially want to take a look at like the undersea combat and holding your breath and things like that, and all of those expanded rules. So, all right, we will check that out. We'll look at this more. So we'll come back to it. Hell Sante. James says, this has been very fun. Farewell, everybody. Everybody, go have fun, be productive, be creative, and grind on. I'll see you tomorrow.